promise. As you know, we every Saturday from 8 to 9:30 we talk. Men get together, we talk, and we talk about anything that affects us as men. Talk about relationship, love. We talk about sports. We talk about myriads of things over the years. We have been doing this for the past 20 years or so, and tonight is no exception. We are going to continue our talk. Now, if you're new to the program, the purpose of the program really is to help build men, to teach men, to encourage men, to teach men what it is to be a man. And, in doing that, we discuss issues that are affecting us, local issues, regional issues, international issues. And if you're a female and you're listening for the very first time, we want to let you know it's an interactive program. That is, as we discuss whatever topic we're going to discuss, along the way, we open up the line to take comments, to take calls. Now, because the program is Men Talk and because we want to encourage men to talk, we do not take calls from ladies. So ladies, please take note. We do not take calls from ladies. However, ladies, we understand that you have a lot to contribute to the program. So what we do, we give you the opportunity to text in a response, either question or comment. Text in, and ladies, you can take the number down right away. Is 275-1981. Ladies, anytime during the conversation, you can text us 275-1981. Men, I will give you the numbers a little later on, the numbers to call. And we really want to encourage the men to call in because we want to hear from you. The program is Men Talk. We want to hear the men talking. As over the past few weeks, we've told you Huey Coffee is not here, George is not here tonight, Rickon is not here. So it's just me by myself and my guest, a very special guest, gentleman who really needs no introduction to the media. He's been in media probably before he was born, I think. I don't know. But, he's a veteran journalist, veteran. I don't want you to call him older because I don't think he likes that too much. But I think he's older than me. I knew him. He may not remember, but I got to know him many, many years ago. We used to attend the same church right on Woodford Street, Newtown Evangelical Church. I knew him from there. Saw him, sometimes. And, over the years, I've been, following his career, his many, I don't know, explanations of so many things that are going on in our country, in our region, many different topics he, has ventilated his views on. And tonight we are really honored to have with us on Mentor, Mr. Tony Fraser. Tony Fraser, good evening and welcome to Mentor.
Good afternoon. I've gone back in time, sorry. Good evening, Noel, Professor Richards. Yeah, I think you have one thing a little bit wrong. When we knew each other, it was at Grace Chapel and not at
Grace Chapel. It was Grace Chapel. Oh,
Grace
yes,
Chapel.
that's right.
Grace
It
Chapel.
was Grace Chapel, yes.
I am older than you, but like the memory is still working.
Well, apparently memory is better than mine. Yes, it's Grace Chapel. Yes, I remember one particular time you were doing, I don't remember what the topic was, but I was so enlightened by what you were sharing. It was some political issue. I don't remember what it is. I mean, has been so long ago, but I've come to respect your opinions on so many different things that I'm sure many people have as well. So we want to welcome you tonight because, I was looking for someone who could really um, expound and explain what is happening with, I think, the story that has taken the headlines away from COVID-19. COVID has been on the front burner for so long, and then on the 24th of February, or maybe even before that, this war between Russia and Ukraine just took over the headlines, and many of us, and I include myself, the lay people, don't really understand. We are not clear as to what is going on, why it's going on. We look at the television. Well, I look at the television every day and I see the bombardment, I see the lives being lost and the place being destroyed. But in terms of understanding why it all happened, why it's happening, and probably predict what is going to happen in the future. I think you're the best person to do that. You've written some articles on it. So we welcome you tonight to this forum. I'm going to give you the forum, right? And maybe jump in a couple of times to ask questions. But because I know you're well versed on this topic, I'm going to just allow you to start wherever you feel like starting and, bring us up to speed with what is happening with Russia and Ukraine.
Okay, Noel, thanks for inviting me. I'm very happy to give some kind of information on what is happening. As you say, the war between Russia and Ukraine. In many ways, I don't consider it a war. It's really an invasion of Ukraine by the powerful Russian army. And look, just before the invasion started, as a prelude, setting the ground, the base work for the invasion, President Putin went on the national media in Russia, and he said a number of things, but his essential claim was that Ukraine has always been part of Russia, and that in fact Ukraine is a creation of Russia. So that was his justification, one of the justifications, I should say, for the invasion of Ukraine. But the story goes back a long way before that. It goes back to the creation of nation states. And if your audience will bear with me for a minute or two, I just want to paint a little picture of that because it's important for us to appreciate the background to all of this. The nation state is a fairly recent creation, the 16th century in Moscow, actually, and that was the Russia of the period, Moscow, not the outskirts of Moscow or anywhere else, but really the Moscow. And I'm sure that listeners and your good self, Noel, would have heard of or read of Ivan the Terrible in Russian history. He was the man who initiated the state of Moscow. But it wasn't a state like the state that we know now with boundaries, with laws, etc., etc., and a population intact. It was a faint version of a state. Of course, that developed over the couple of centuries thereafter. Um, you talk about France in the 18th century, Napoleon, and you still had countries on states and parts of states, Prussia and Germany and so on, so that the nation state took a long time to form itself or be formed. Now, conflict in Europe amongst European station countries, that is not something new of the 22nd, 21st century at all. That has been going on for years. In fact, in the 17th century, there were 30 years of continuous wars amongst the various tribal states. Let's call them tribal states because they weren't the states that we know of now. There was a treaty called the Treaty of Westphalia, which is a part of Europe, and the countries came together in the 17th century to say, let's end this war and let's establish something of a base for states to exist. And remember, we are talking about rudimentary states. You had the Greek city-states at another point in time and so on. But a number of historians rarely talk about the nation state as we know it now in the post-World War I period. It was a war between Germany and France and England and so on, fighting each other over all kinds of things. And the historians make the point that the nations, the world that we have today really came out of the post-World War I period. You had the Treaty of Versailles, which identified states, identified nations, identified something of the relationship of states. You had the creation of the League of Nations, which was a forerunner to today's United Nations. So it is out of that period came the nation states, and out of that period, when Germany lost against the combination of other European countries, Germany was made to pay a very high price. It had to pay compensation to the countries It was accorded a lower status. Parts of its territories, uh, parts of those territories, sorry, were confiscated and distributed amongst countries like, well, Austria, Prussia. They were all part of the German states at that point in time. So out of that mess came a gentleman called Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler, you're going to see the connection in a moment to the present time. Adolf Hitler was a soldier in the German army, and he was pained by Germany being reduced to nothing. There was no proud German empire anymore. And he retaliated against that. And what we had? World War II. A gentleman called Vladimir Putin came out of a different kind of scramble. That scramble started in 1989 when the then president of the Soviet Union, which was, incidentally, the Soviet Union was formed out of Russia gathering a number of states, Georgia, the said Ukraine, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, etc. All of Eastern Europe, and of course Germany was then divided between East and West Germany, Russia controlling East Germany. And out of that came an agent of the state, a man called Vladimir Putin, who was, like Hitler, very disturbed to Russia being, first of all, the Soviet Union being dismantled by Gorbachev with perestroika and glasnost, which meant that the state had to open up and there had to be interaction amongst the state, because the Russian economy was in a very terrible state. And we don't want to talk about Stalin and Lenin and all of that. That complicates the history too much. But the point, and the point that I want to connect is that out of the tangle of World War II, when German territory was distributed, when Russia became powerful as part of the Soviet Union and all of that, there was a man inside there bearing a serious grudge. This was after 1945, much later, into the 60s, into the 80s, into that period of time, came Putin. And Putin's contention was that the Soviet Union and the power of the empire of Russia had been broken up and distributed amongst a number of other countries, and Russia was left alone. And his intent, as he made that speech in late January, early February, his intent and what is driving him, as far as I can understand, is really to regroup the Soviet Union in some form or the other, to make Russia a strong and powerful empire once more. And because after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, a number of those Eastern European countries became part of what the West called NATO, which is an alliance among states by international treaty. And the essential point of it is, like, you know, when we were small fellas and we had partners and so on, if you touch one of them, you touch all of them. And that is really the essence of NATO. And therefore, all of those former Soviet Union countries, bar Ukraine, have become part of NATO. Poland and well, Czechoslovakia was broken into two, into the Slovak Republic and the Czech Republic, Romania, etc., etc. So Putin's intention really, and that is the bigger picture, Putin's intention is to reassemble something of an empire out of the Russian state that exists now. And he has gone into Georgia, he took part of Crimea and Belarus, which is manipulated by one of his proteges. And so he's on the march. The next one is Ukraine. Ukraine now serves as a kind of buffer between the NATO countries and Russia. And what Putin is hell-bent on not happening is that Ukraine becomes part of that NATO club. So that if you touch Ukraine, if he touches Ukraine, then legally all of the NATO countries are allowed by treaty to get involved. So this is where this matter is at point. There's a point, a very important point I want to make before I stop and ask you if you want to ask anything. During the reign of President, let me start here, the President Trump. What President Trump was attempting to do, and did some of it, was to attempt to have NATO disintegrated. I don't know if our listeners would remember, but he was up against NATO all the time. He was contending against him. And clearly what he wanted to do was to weaken NATO. That was an objective. Whether he was driven by Putin or not, that is for people to make a judgment about. So that, let me just stop there to say is that the invasion of Ukraine is to, one, prevent Ukraine becoming part of the NATO alliance, and two, to make a step forward in terms of recreating something of the Soviet Empire of the period that has gone.
Okay, thank you so much, folks. You're listening to Men Talk on Isaac 98.1 FM, The Promise. We're also live on Facebook. That's Isaac The Promise, our Facebook page, and the FBN TV. That's our YouTube channel. And we want to say thank you so much also to our sponsor, Anaya Tony, the Feet Lady. And don't forget, ladies, you know, if you have questions, you can WhatsApp us at 275-1981. We're talking our guest tonight, Tony Fraser. Now, Tony, isn't it the right of any sovereign country to align themselves to whomever they choose? And if that is so, what gives another country the right to prevent them from doing that? Now, I understand what you're saying, that Putin wants to reassemble the Soviet Union in some form or the other. We understand that. But in doing so, the countries that he wants to reassemble, in my mind, should say, okay, yes, we are for it. We will join you. This, you know, we will build back the Soviet Union. But if one country says, no, I don't want to be a part of that, what gives Putin the right to try to force that country not to do what it wants to do? If it's a sovereign country, what gives him the right to do that?
And that's an excellent point, because part of the international treaty allows a country's self-determination, and non-intervention is a principle of international relations which cannot or should not be violated. If it has been violated 78 times in the recent past, mainly by Western countries and the Soviet Union back then, and Russia subsequently. So yes, it's a principle of each sovereign state being allowed to make a determination of its sovereignty and where it should go, who it should ally itself with. But that's not the reality of power relations. And let me take you back to 1962, when Cuba decided that it wanted to be aligned with the Soviet Union, the then Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union under Khrushchev determined that it wanted to arm its satellite state in the backyard, so to speak, of the United States. Sparrow interpreted it nicely. He said Kennedy told Khrushchev to turn them ships in the opposite direction, because Kennedy is the man for them. So that in the same way that the United States would not tolerate a client state of Russia or the Soviet Union in its backyard, so too the Russians do not want to have a client state, i.e. Ukraine, a member of NATO, on its border. It wants to use, in one of its arguments, it wants to use Ukraine as a buffer state between itself and Western Europe. So yes, under international law, countries are allowed their sovereignty, and countries are debarred from intervening in the sovereign territory of another country. But as I pointed out, the UN charts 78 such interventions by the rich and powerful countries on all sides of the ideological fence over the period of time. Uh, so the real world says something different from what was set out in the post-1945 period under the United Nations Treaty.
So is that the reason why they seem helpless now? And you talk about those 78 military interventions, right, which have been allowed. Is that what is tying their hands now? In that, if they've done that in the past and they've allowed that in the past, um, they shouldn't. I mean, it would be deceitful to say, well, Russia can't do it as well. Is that what is tying their hands?
What is tying the hands of the both sides now is something called nuclear weaponry. Doomsday scenario. That, for instance, let me give you an example. Putin says that he will not tolerate Ukraine being declared a no-fly zone, meaning that Russian missiles and jets and aircraft and whatever won't be allowed to fly over Ukraine. And of course, that will put an end to the bombing, the aerial bombing that is going on at the present time. But Putin has drawn the line. Putin says that if you do that, that is intervention beyond what you allowed, i.e., to arm states and to give them economic support, humanitarian support, and so on. So that red line has been drawn. If you listen to President Zelensky, he is desperate for this no-fly zone to be declared. But according to Putin and his red line, if the West, if NATO does that, then we're talking a different language of armory.
And I suppose this is what they're afraid of, it becoming nuclear. But in doing so, in not interfering, I mean, you're allowing a bully. You're allowing a country to be bullied by a superpower. Ukraine is not a superpower. Russia is. And Russia has invaded Ukraine. They have decimated, a couple of their cities. They've killed people. And why is it that everybody's hands are tied? I mean, what's the purpose of NATO? If NATO cannot intervene, is it that if Ukraine was a member of NATO, then then they could have done something? Is it that the independent states, those states that make up NATO, are they saying, well, look, we're afraid of this guy because he could turn his guns on us? What is it? What makes Putin so big and bad? Let me put it that way. What makes him?
Yeah, because essentially, it's the nuclear weaponry that is possessed by Russia. Russia has the largest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the world, larger than America. But you don't have to be too large in a nuclear war. 2 or 3 bombs will do it. Whether you have, I think it's 600 nuclear weapons that the Russians possess. You don't need 600. You probably don't even need 6. And that really is what is standing between war, a wholesale war in Ukraine, and Russia taking over the country, or the West beating back Russia in the instance. The West cannot go beyond, or let me say, has not determined at this point to go beyond the point of supplying arms, giving humanitarian support and that kind of thing. Because Putin has said that if you come into here, then we're talking a different kind of fight. And President Biden has said that it is not the intention of America to go to war with Russia at this point in time, because he knows that that's a war that nobody can win.
So is Ukraine helpless in the sense that nobody is coming to help them? At least not the kind of help that they have been asking for. the no-fly zone, that they're asking for weapons and that sort of thing. So is it that it's they're on their own? And if that is so, then this is a war that can only have one result. Sooner or later, it's going to happen if there is not some sort of an intervention from outside, from the West. Then this is a war that Ukraine cannot win. So, you know, thinking about that, my question is, why would President Zelensky, I think is his name, why would he want to continue, defending something that is, you can't defend in the long term?
Yeah. Well, there are a number of responses to that. The first one is that the Ukrainians, led by their president, have shown themselves to be very resilient people, very resilient, very resourceful, and intent on hanging on to their piece of territory. Noel, in this world, whether you're a state of the size of St. Kitts in the Caribbean with 80, 90,000 people, not too sure of the exact number, or whether you're a country the size of Ukraine with 45 million people, people are committed to their country and their state, and they feel they want to fight, I was going to say die for it, but really to fight to keep it alive. And the Ukrainians have done an excellent job in terms of showing their steadfastness to the task. I don't agree with you, though, that nothing has been done for them. Billions of dollars have been poured into the Ukraine in terms of arms. The arms that they're fighting with have come from the West, from the United States, from Britain, from France, etc., etc. It is just that they are not going, the West is not, NATO is not prepared at this point in time to go beyond that red line. And think about it. Think about what will happen if there is full engagement, NATO against Russia. I think that Putin, because he's so driven by ego and desire, and that's a whole new story with Putin, the man himself. I think if there is any world leader prepared to press a button, it's going to be Putin. He is so driven by his passion of empire and the Soviet Union that I think he is prepared to go to any lengths to achieve that. President Biden and the West are far more cautious, far more realistic of what will happen in the circumstances. But let me make a point too, that this is not the first time that the West has stood still, if you want to use that term, and I'm not using it because I am saying that they have given quite a lot to Ukraine in all kinds of forms of support. The West stood still and allowed white South Africa, a small minority of white South Africans, Afrikaans, to brutalize for a couple generations the Black majority in South Africa. The West stood by. In fact, the West created, and this is an interesting subject to raise on your radio station, Noel. The West stood by. In fact, the West created Israel out of Palestinian lands and supported Israel to be a nuclear power today, while the Palestinians have been brutalized and murdered for generations. So that there is a concern now by other countries saying that this is a European war, this is a war between Euro-America and Russia, and we are not part of that. Interestingly, in all of this, China is on the sidelines, and the West is attempting to bring China in on its side, not wanting it to join with Russia. Of course, China has different ambitions. They're not military ambitions, they're economic ambitions. They want to spread the Silk Road all over the world and control the economic power of the world. They're not into fighting and killing and so on. If they have to, of course, they will. So that my point in saying all of these things is that this world is a world of unfairness, of inequality, of inequity, and Euro-America has taken advantage of that, of non-white, third world, Latin American countries, Caribbean countries in a significant way. So while everybody's getting uptight about the Ukrainians, and they should, because one death is as good as a million, in the sense that whether it's one African or one Ukrainian, it's a human uh, person that is being degraded.
Indeed. Folks, you're listening to Men Talk on Isaac 98.1 FM, The Promise, Isaac the Promise Facebook page, and the FBN TV. That's our YouTube channel. Sponsored today by the Feet Lady, Lady of Reflexology, Anaya Tony. And don't forget, we'll be opening up the line soon to take your calls. In fact, let me just give you the numbers, gentlemen. The ladies, 275-1981. That's where you send a text message. 275-1981. For the men, I know you may have your questions, so take these numbers down: 480-4121, 480-4121, and 463-7208. 463-7208. We are talking about the war between Russia and Ukraine, a war that Tony says is not a war. Um, he doesn't agree that it's a war at all, and I'm sure many people agree with him. We're trying to understand the whys and the history and perhaps even the future, what is going to come out of this intervention by Russia. Now, I want to understand something, Tony, that red line that has been drawn. What can, because you said they didn't agree with me that they have been supplied with help. They haven't been given help. So my question is, what kind of help can they get? What can NATO do that does not cross that line that Putin has talked about? What can they do and what have they been doing?
Yeah. Well, frankly, there's little that can be done that will not trigger an all-out war. There's very little that can be done. One thought that has been put forward by an American international relations expert is that to create, which is allowed under the UN system, create something of a buffer zone within Ukraine to have people, refugees if you like, stay in that area without being attacked. But I am sure that Putin is not going to observe anything like that. Putin is intent on doing what he's doing. He has declared zones of peace, and in the middle of a zone of peace, he has bombed the life out of the city. So that to get him to respect any demarcating line is going to be very difficult. I want to raise another matter. I don't know if you're going on to your listeners.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, just let me raise the matter of one of the things that the West, led by America, Britain, and Germany, etc., is that they have taken the kind of economic action against Russia. They have cut off all kinds of economic lines into Russia. They have stopped, even Europe, highly dependent on Russian energy, i.e. gas and oil. They have determined to take their oil and gas elsewhere. Of course, the Americans will be a beneficiary of that. There is no true nation in this world, you know. The bottom line is self-interest.
Yes.
Imagine, just to give you an example of that, 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, the Americans were saying, let us talk to Venezuela again. And why they want to talk to Venezuela? Because they want the enormous supply of gas and oil in Venezuela in these difficult times to be distributed to stop the price of oil and gas going through the roof. So that self-interest is the bottom line that is prevailing here. Now, the economic sanctions that have been brought against Russia, the West is realizing that those economic sanctions are coming back to bite them. I'm sure that you know of the supply chains which have been disrupted, inflation is skyrocketing in the circumstances, and that chain of price reaction has just started. And you know who are going to be the worst off for it? Countries like us, who are not part of any of this. Whatever we do and say will have no impact whatsoever on this matter. But the economic sanctions that have been taken against Russia and the Americans and Europe, they're attempting to get China to cut off their own supplies to Russia. It's impacting everywhere. So there is no foolproof solution to any of these difficulties in this invasion and occupation of Ukraine by Russia.
Question is though, Tony, can Russia sustain you know, the sanctions have been placed against it? Can they? Is it that because I'm hearing that, well, this is something that they have been planning for years. They have put things in place, you know, to deal with the situations like these. So is it that they are prepared to deal with all these sanctions, these economic sanctions that, you know, been issued by the European countries, by the West? Are they able to sustain that for a period of time, a long period of time?
Yes, of course, they're a resilient country, and there can be ways that they can circumvent some of it. But for a long period of time, against all of these sanctions, no country can survive. And that is why the West is so engaged with attempting to engage China, because China can be a source of supplies, and it is a source of supplies to Russia. And therefore, Russia will be dependent on China in this regard. So that if you think about Cuba, for instance, the Americans have had sanctions, economic sanctions, political sanctions, travel sanctions, you name it, against Cuba for 60 years, and Cuba has survived. And Cuba is a far less resilient and resourceful country than Russia. However, this is a modern age of technology and computerization and so on. And if Russia does not get the support of, say, China, it's going to be in a very difficult situation. But we have to remember too that the Russian economy is a very weak economy. It survives on two things: energy resources and wheat. It is a strong producer of wheat to Western countries, to African countries, etc., etc. But the sanctions, the economic sanctions, they're beginning to bite. But I want our listeners to keep in mind one thing. We talk about Russia and we act as if it's a Russian oligarchy, a Russian state that is doing all of this. I want to submit, it is not all of that. It is one man.
Well,
a man with ambitions of empire. Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, I'm glad you're saying that, because that would have been that was my next question. Is all of this to do with the man himself, the character of the man, Vladimir Putin? And not so much, as you said, you know, all those that are around him. Is it the character of the man? Is it because of him? Is it because he's such a strong leader, forceful leader? Is it that he is, perhaps we can maybe suggest that if it was someone else, that things would have been different? Can we say that? Is that man that big and that powerful?
Absolutely. And there is a very critical element that he has used and is continuing to use, and which he borrowed from the gentleman I spoke about before, Adolf Hitler. And that thing is propaganda. 3/4 or even a larger portion, I can't give you what the portion is. In Russia, the Russian population knows nothing of the reality of what is happening in Ukraine, because they are being told a different story by Vladimir Putin, and of course in charge of his propaganda machinery and so on. So that Russians inside, and that is why I'm saying that it's driven by this one man, his ego, his desire. I'm surprised, Noel, that you all fellas haven't called him the what's it? The 666 man.
Well, who knows? You never know. You never know.
So
Let's see what
it's
is
driven by
happening.
him, his ambition, his desires, because he sees Russia as an empire that has been trodden upon, and his ego is very much involved there. So that the propaganda, what you and I know about what is happening in Ukraine, the Russian population by and large does not know. The internet has shut down, Facebook has been denied them, etc. And they are getting only what comes from the Russian state.
And that is so sad. And that's the reality, it's interesting in 2022 when communication and when technology is as it is, where you can, communicate with people across the globe, you can still have a country that has shut down communication from the outside world so that, the people in the country, as you say, have no idea what is going on the outside. And when you hear, I mean, I have seen some clips of some people, Russians, supporting what is going on, and they have been told that it's something like a military exercise or something like that to that effect. And to think that we are seeing all that is going on, and they haven't a clue as to what is happening. And I wonder, I mean, if it is that you are so strong and you are so influential, then why not let your people see what is happening and see if they would still support you? I would think that if he felt that self-confident, he would do that. But I guess
He knows the sources of his strengths, and one of the major sources of his strengths is propaganda and lies. Now, don't get me wrong, the Western media also have been throwing out lots of propaganda. I'm sure that you've heard, on anyone who has listened, you are swearing that Ukraine can come out of this war ahead of Russia. I am not buying that. Simply, when Putin has been pushed back, he has not expected the kind of resistance that he has got. But the overwhelming power of Russia, without resorting to nuclear weaponry and chemical weaponry, can flatten and has flattened a number of cities and villages and towns in Ukraine. Yeah, the Western media is making it sound that Ukraine is about to win the war. Well, I mean, that's really far from the truth.
Folks, you're listening to Men Talk on Isaac 98.1 FM, The Promise FBN TV, and Isaac The Promise Facebook page. We're going to open up the lines now to take your calls. Men, just remember that is still Men Talk, even though we're talking about an international situation. The program is still Men Talk, so we take calls on men only. Ladies, if you have a question, please WhatsApp us at 275-1981. I'm going to ask Adesola to check to see if we have any WhatsApp messages. 275-1981 for the ladies. Gentlemen, if you have a question or comment or even information you think that we can use based on what is happening, 480-4121, 480-4121, and 463-7208. 463-7208. The lines are open. You can call at any time now. In the meantime, I want to ask this question.
Professor, we have a call on the line.
Okay, let's take the call. Hello, good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, Adesola.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Yes, hi. This is George Thomas. Blessed evening to you. Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. Yes. Unfortunately, due to prior confines on work, I'm not able to be on the program. However, I've been listening in, and it's been so integral what I'm hearing, concerning the situation in Ukraine. One of the other things that we need to bear in mind is that at the end of the day, just as well, one of the resources that Russia provides is something called palladium, which is critical for the microchips that we use in our phones and in our day-to-day electronic equipment. we have been in vast shortages of these things for quite some time, something over 2 to 3 years. And now, particularly with this war taking place in Trinidad and Tobago, microchips and these things are in vast shortages. And just as well, wheat is something that Russia is the leading provider of wheat for the world. You know, so these are also things that will directly affect us. But I have one question, if I may ask.
Go ahead.
Should this get to the state of World War III, which God forbid that it ever gets to there, I would like to know what our position would be, seeing as how, to my knowledge, Trinidad and Tobago ideally bears allegiance to the West, to the United States, whereas our neighbors, our counterparts, Venezuela, they bear allegiance to Russia. What would be our situation should this conflict escalate to something of a World War III? And how effective would something like CARICOM be in such a situation, in having our voice heard on the world scale, and having us well defended on the world scale should something like that break out? And that's my humble question. Good night. Love you, Trinidad and Tobago. I'm gone.
Thank you, George. So you heard the question, Tony?
Yeah, I did. We talked loosely about World War III, but what will be a World War III? Will it be Europe against Russia, China against Russia? The caller is talking about Trinidad and Tobago and CARICOM position. We really have no say in any of these matters. We are simply, the effects will simply hit us. We have no say, absolutely no say, and whether we stand on the side of the West or the East really will not matter. But logically, of course, we will be we're in the West. How can we be against the Soviet Union and China? How can we be supportive of them in America's backyard? I mean, that's illogical and so on. But Trinidad and Tobago and CARICOM really do not count in this scenario. With the effects of what is being referred to as a World War III, which I think I can interpret as Euro-America against Russia and China, perhaps. We are simply the war takers, if you like, in all of that. It will impact upon us. We have no say in the matter. And if, I think there was a Trinidadian recently who said he wanted to go and fight on the side of Ukraine, good luck to him. And all
someone actually said that.
Yeah, a man called, he's a UNC activist. His name slips me at the moment. But he wants support to go and fight on the side of Ukraine.
Yeah, that's interesting. But one of the things we talked about was the fact that Venezuela.
Brian Stone is the man's name.
Brian Stone. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that Venezuela would more than likely support Russia. That's what he's suggesting. And then we are in close proximity to Venezuela. So what does that do? That will be a major challenge for us. And
But as I mentioned a moment ago, America has started to woo the Venezuelans. And the Venezuelans, this is about self-interest, the bottom line. Ideology is for big states like China and Russia and America and so on. If the Venezuelans get into a squeeze and they see a way out, they are pragmatic people and they will look for the easiest way out. You're in the belly of the beast. What are you going to do there? You think Russia is coming to protect Venezuela in the circumstances? So it's that those are really non-starters in this. If this thing is engaged totally.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, if this thing is engaged totally, the fallout is that we may not even have a planet again, because we talk about nuclear disaster. But anyway,
I don't know what
So,
your good book says about that. Um, yeah,
that's another thing we will have to talk about. Yeah,
whether the thing is going to go up in fire as predicted, I don't know.
we will we will see. I'm going to bring in a couple of people to talk about that as well, the biblical side of it, the spiritual side. Um, Folks, you can call us, man. You can call us at 480-4121, 480-4121, and 463-7208. Those are the numbers to call, 480-4121 and 463-7208. We await your calls. We're talking to Tony Fraser. We're talking about well, I don't know what to call it. He says it's not a war. Maybe the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That's what we're discussing. Um, but let me ask you while we wait on another call, because you alluded to it just now. But I asked a question before, and I want to come back to it. You said that the Western journalists are painting a picture of Ukraine winning the war. All right, that's what you said. My question before was, why defend something that you know you can't win? Yeah, I understand you want to defend your country, you're patriotic, you don't want anybody to just run over, run through your country. I understand that. But this is Russia you're talking about. This is not Trinidad against Jamaica, where we might be evenly matched. Russia has nuclear weapons, which they haven't used so far. And even the non-nuclear weapons are, they demolishing cities in Ukraine. So you know that you cannot win this war. Russia can keep this up. So why, I would think that as a president, I would think about the welfare of my people. I would say, listen, I don't want any more people killed. We can't win this. Help is not coming from the outside. Sooner or later, they're going to overrun, all of our cities. Maybe I should just quit I can't even say while I'm ahead, but quit now before it gets worse. Why wouldn't, the president of Ukraine take a position like that?
Yeah. No, I think it's beyond the President Zelensky, as well-meaning as he is. This is beyond him. This really goes to the soul of a people. What do men live by? What is in the mind of the human being? Think about biblical history. When people refuse to surrender themselves and their souls and their spirits to something that is alien to them, even if they feel they cannot resist completely. On the other side of that, you talk about they can't win, but what kind of state will they live in thereafter? The Russians have shown clearly that they are going to, if they are allowed to, if they can, destroy physically all of Ukraine. What kind of country will you live in afterwards, so that there are people who are staking their lives on this? This is their country, this is all that they know. And there is something in the human spirit, which I am sure that you are very versed with, Noel, that you can't take that out of people. That is their desire. They will die for it because they believe beyond the material, and they believe in something that is deeper than the material. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
I hear you. No, I hear you. But you see, you're saying, you're asking the question, what kind of country will we live in, after this, if we surrender? But the point is, you'll be living in this scenario.
That's not too sure. That is not too certain.
No, but in this scenario, you're not going to live.
Remember, Hitler wiped out 6 million Jews, and he's not alone in that respect.
I hear you. But I am just thinking that, I'm seeing old people and the young people dying, babies and hospitals are being decimated because they are shooting indiscriminately, They are saying that they are attacking military bases, but we see, in the population, we see hospitals, schools, all these things being devastated. So, it's not like there's protection anywhere. So and that's my point. So it's not like it's just the military people that you've sent out there to defend the country are dying. You're talking about civilians, innocent civilians. And
Yeah.
if I'm responsible for people and their lives, I would say, listen, let me see what I can do to preserve their life, even if it means surrender. But
Yeah.
again, that's just me. I'm not the president. I'm
But
not in
but
that position. Yeah.
it's beyond the president. It's beyond the president. He cannot call it off or call it on. It's beyond him. It's people who are willing to fight for what they believe and they perceive if they give in to the Russians, what kind of life do you think they will live? I'm not saying that for them. They are contemplating if the Russians can so brutally kill women, children, defenseless, blow down hospitals, um, children, kindergarten centers, and so on. They are conceiving of these people, living under these people, and saying that I prefer to die defending what I believe in.
Wow.
It's a human, a power of a human spirit, man.
Human spirit. I hear you. I hear you. Folks, again, you can call us. Don't the numbers are 480-4121, 480-4121, and 463-7208. Those are the two numbers for the men to call. Men, we want to hear from you. I know it's a little different than what we usually discuss, but I think it's important that men understand what is really happening in the world. And, I mean, it's not on our backyard, but the whole world, I guess, the world is such a global village that what happens on the other side of the globe will affect us. And that's the thing, Tony, how will this affect us? I know, okay, the price of oil, and this is something people ask me, and maybe you could explain it because we are an exporter of oil and gas. And yet, the fact that the price of oil and gas is going up is affecting us negatively. How is that so?
Okay, well, the price of gas and oil going up is not impacting negatively on us. In fact, it's impacting positively on us in that we're getting additional revenue because of the high prices and so on. But the world is not made up only of oil and gas. We have to buy other things which are counter to what is happening with oil and gas. So that you take with one hand, to put it in regular terms, you take with one hand and you pay it out in the other hand. In fact, the Prime Minister has gone on record in saying that the hike in prices in medication and all of the things that we import will skyrocket. So we get a little thing from oil and gas, high prices, and we pay 3 and 4 times more in terms of all of the commodities, in terms of all of the manufacturers. You know, we have a limited range of manufacturers that we produce for ourselves. We have to buy everything else from abroad. And those prices are escalating already. And therefore, we will be impacted. A moment ago, there was a talk about us not being impacted. This might be conceived of as a war between Europe and America, and we in the Southern Caribbean zone, we happy like papi and free and so on. That is not so. As you said some time ago, everything impacts everywhere in the world. Back in the 1940s, before I was born, in World War II, it wasn't happening in our backyard, but we were affected. There were ration cards. People, I don't know if there are people in the audience who knew about the ration cards, but there were ration cards that you had to present to get a pound of rice. And if you get a pound of rice one day, you can't go back tomorrow and ask for another pound. So that we don't live in a world isolated in a world by ourselves. We have already been affected, and we shall continue to be affected as long as this invasion goes on in Ukraine.
Yes, folks, it's 9:13. We're still taking your calls. I don't know why the men are not calling tonight because this is something that I feel. Maybe you understand it better than I do. Maybe Tony has explained it well, so you don't have any questions. But in case you do, the numbers are 480-4121, 480-4121, and 463-7208, 463-7208. Ladies, of course, you send a WhatsApp message to 275-1981. We're talking about the Russian-Ukraine invasion, and I'm hoping, I'm trusting and hoping that this is not news to anybody, because this is something that it's been in the news for more than a month now.
Professor,
And
we have a
what is
call,
happening
Professor.
across there. So we have a call?
Yes. Hello, good evening.
Go ahead.
Yes, Professor.
Hello?
I support
Yes.
Ukrainians, and I support Ukrainians. I prefer to die from a country rather than be a slave to another country.
Okay, say that again. I didn't quite get it.
I prefer to die from a country than to be a slave to another country.
Oh, you prefer to die to your country, for your country, than to be a slave of another country. Is that what you're saying?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, so you're actually explaining what Tony has said. Yes?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I hear you too. Thank you. Thank you very much. I am just thinking, and I understand the average man saying that, wanting to die for his country. I'm just thinking, as a leader, I have to think about the welfare of everybody. And there are people who cannot defend themselves. There are people who, your whole life has been disrupted. One day you have a job, you're going to work, you're married, you have children, you have your children, you're playing, or whatever you do on a daily basis, and then suddenly you're a refugee. You're walking across to some border to find refuge, and that is my thing. So if it is, as a president, as a leader, for me, but of course you said Tony is beyond him, but for me as a leader, I am thinking about the welfare of my people and saving their lives. But again, it's, as you said, it's beyond him. Mike, I want to ask another question. There's something, Putin said that Ukraine is a creation of Russia. Could you explain that?
Sorry, I took my microphone off for a moment. There's really no logic to Putin's statement. As I said, Moscow was the city-state, as it were, created by Ivan the Terrible in the 16th century.
Professor, we have a call. Yes.
Moscow, it spread within Russia, that is Russia. And then Russia created the Soviet Union, spreading to other countries. So really it's an illogical, it is not founded in any kind of substantial evidence and so on. It is Putin's way of justifying his action. If the country belongs to you, well, then you have a right to take it back, would be his action. Look at the case of Taiwan and China. And China claims that Taiwan, it's its own. Hong Kong, it has took over Hong Kong. And there is even more merit in that. I'm not saying that China is right, but China can't go in and just take over Taiwan just like that. Because it has a notion that Taiwan is part of the greater China area. Hong Kong is a different story, a small island on the cusp of the mainland, and it's like swatting flies. You go over, and it's a little bit different. And there are a lot of Western countries that will support and have supported the independence of Taiwan. So it's a little bit more difficult in those circumstances. So there's really, it is founded. If I am to give you an answer, Professor.
One sec, Mr. Fraser, we take a call.
Founded.
One sec,
Sorry,
we'll take a call at this time. There's a call on the line.
Sure.
Hello, good evening.
Very good evening. Call to ask a question.
Go ahead, sir.
Go ahead.
Very good evening to everyone, Professor Richards, your gentleman who is handling the boards, and to Mr. Tony Raquel Fraser. Thank you for the discussion. Can you explore further the propaganda that, or maybe the information / propaganda, I don't know how you would see it, that is being pushed by Russia and other countries that support them, that one of the bases for the incursion into Ukraine is for the denazification of Ukraine, where it is purported that there are extreme right-wing elements, fascists, neo-Nazis, who have an agenda, and that they are secretly or overtly setting up their influences to cause grave disruption within the Western society. That's one, and the other objective of the Russian incursion is to deal with the biolab, and that's something that is being pushed. I don't know how you see these pieces of information. If you could explore that.
Thank you for your call.
Okay,
Tony?
much welcome.
Well, the first one being the Nazification of Ukraine and so on. Putin has a fertile imagination. Where is that happening? What is that? What is happening? Where has that come from? That is pure propaganda without any substance whatsoever. How is it that only Putin knows about this Nazification? But where is it happening in Ukraine? We must have heard something about it, except from Putin. And what's the second question that the caller asked? Just remind me.
Something about the biolabs.
Well, again, a lot of fertile imagination at work there. I don't know anything about the biolab. I don't know that I've read anything or heard anything of substance on it.
Okay. Folks, we just have 10 minutes or less. If you have a question, please call us 480-4121 and 463-7208. One of the things that you have said, Tony, in one of your articles is that Putin cannot be tried as a war criminal. Tell us why you're saying that.
Well, there are two international courts that deal with criminal matters. Well, actually one that deals with criminal matters and one that deals with matters of justice of a different kind in the international arena. One, the International Criminal Court, the ICC, that's the full criminal court, and the other one is the ICJ, that's the International Court of Justice, which deals with non-criminal matters, as it were. So the first one is the one that we're talking about. Russia, America, Israel, and one or two other countries in that orbit do not belong to the court. So that if they are not signed up for the court, President Biden has called them a war criminal, but that is a different kind of propaganda coming from the other side. He cannot be tried. Remember the weapons of mass destruction that Bush and Blair have, invented, and according to the United Nations, not Tony Fraser, according to the United Nations, some 350,000 people plus innocent civilians were killed. Has anybody brought America before the International Criminal Court? They can't, because they're not members of the International Criminal Court. That is for you small countries. Go and try your people, but leave our people alone. You can't interfere with us. Power is the name of the game.
And it seems so. So then, who can do what, in this war? Because it seems as though, he will keep marching on until he gets what he gets. And it seems that nobody is stopping. And I'm wondering as well, because of his character, maybe people are, I don't want to say afraid. Maybe afraid is a word. They are afraid of him, and he's likely to push the button, the nuclear button. Is that the thinking among the world's leaders that Vladimir Putin will likely or more than likely, if anything happens, push that button. He will do as he says he will do. Because there are some people, of course, they bluff. They do a lot of bluffing. If you do this, I will do that. But is it that the world leaders feel that this man is serious? He's not making joke and he will do it.
Well, a number of leaders of NATO countries believe that Putin's resolve should be tested in this regard. Some of them believe that they should engage in the no-fly zone and they should push as hard as they can against Putin. But there are others more conservative, more afraid, perhaps more aware of the power of nuclear force, that they are not willing to push Putin that far. So that, in spite of all of this, you have to have a crazed, mad mind that will push the nuclear button, push the conflict to the stage where he may just decide to use a nuclear weapon of one kind or the other. And starting with President Biden, there are Russian nuclear, I don't know the right terminology for some of these weaponry that are pointed at New York City. And there is no way that the Americans are going to bomb Moscow with nuclear weapons and not get a few in its own backyard. So that there is a very realistic deterrence, as it is called. A Russian political analyst, late Russia, did I say Russian? African, yeah. Sorry. Ali Mazrui, Professor Ali Mazrui said the best deterrence is that any country that can have a nuclear weapon should be allowed to have one. Then all of us in a position, imagine Trinidad and Tobago with a couple of nukes and telling Venezuela, you keep quiet. Or Guyana is a better example. Venezuela, you better keep quiet because I'm going to drop one in the Essequibo and you're going to be something of the past. But seriously, it is a very important thing. But I want to bring one point very forcefully before we end, Noel. And this has to do, if you're going to ask me, or if anybody is going to ask me, how do we begin to resolve this international conflict?
That's the question, yes.
Yeah, and my position is that it cannot be resolved in the present world environment, because the present world environment is about the holding and the exercise of power, one country over the other country. Countries are spending trillions of dollars on weaponry to protect them against the possibility of some other country getting it into their head to take advantage. So the world power structure is really determined by weaponry and power and the ability to use it against the other country. There's another strong element of it, and it is racism. A lot of us don't like to talk about it, but we saw it at the borders of Poland and Czechoslovakia and those countries, that 100, and I'm just reporting what I read, 100,000 blacks have been, Africans and Indians, Asians, have been in Ukraine studying whatever they have been studying. And they were stopped at the borders from going into the country. Think about all the refugee crises in Africa, and Africans attempting to swim the distance between the continents and to get to some safe land. And they're packed on a boat the next day. What is happening with European people? I'm not saying that they shouldn't, they're accepting their kiss and kin, and it's based simply on race. So that we cannot have a world that is so iniquitous, so disadvantaged to African peoples, to non-white peoples. And there can be no solution, immediate solution. I go along with you, Professor, on that. Armageddon is in front of us. Seriously, man has not been able to solve his problems. And I don't see how it's going to happen now.
Yeah, indeed. Tony Fraser, thank you so much for sharing with us and enlightening us, educating us on what is happening, on that side of the world. I know we are just observers here, but the implications are great, both economically and spiritually as well. And we're going to be exploring that, even further. But I thank you for what you've shared today. You brought a lot of enlightenment to me, a lot of understanding, because I had a lot of questions. I really didn't understand certain things, and I think you were the best person to do that. So thank you so much for guesting with us today, for sharing your knowledge. And, God bless you. We'll meet again. We'll see again. I'm sure it's not going to be the last time, because I'm sure there are a whole lot more questions that we would want to ask. Yeah, so Tony,
my friend,
you so much.
Feel free anytime to call on me. Take
Wonderful. Take care. Okay, bye-bye. Folks, this is the end of Men Talk for today. We will be back with you next Saturday at 8 p.m. from 8 to 9:30. That's the time. We had some technical difficulties today, so we started a bit late. But we will be back hopefully on time next week. Next week, Saturday, God's willing. And that's it. So, God bless you. My name is Noel Richards, a.k.a. The Professor, and I'm handing back over to Adesola in studio.
Professor, have a good evening.
Okay, bye-bye.
Hey, this is Noel Professor Richards, inviting you to join me every Saturday night at 8 p.m. for Men Talk. We will talk about how to live, how to love, and how to lead. It's 1.5 hours of men talking about all the things that men talk about. So don't miss it. It's Men Talk every Saturday at 8 p.m. on Isaac The Promise Facebook page, FBN TV, and Isaac 98.1 FM, The Promise.
Hello.
Hey Jack, you missed the meeting yesterday, boy. What happened?
Andre, I was under some pressure, boy. Well, I know Uncle have diabetes, high blood pressure, and poor circulation. He couldn't even walk properly yesterday, so I took him to the feet lady, boy, Dr. Anaya Tony. And let me tell you something, when they're done with him, he feels so good. You know the man forget he walking stick by them? When I go back for the next session, we'll get back, man.
I must send her number to my cousin. She have a pinched nerve, lupus. And I think she uncle got a stroke, you know. I had to see about my back pain too.
Well, Andre, what are you waiting for? Take these numbers down one time. 360-5166 and 478-7416. Dr. Anaya Tony, boy, the feet lady from Anaya Health and Wellness Center. You can't go wrong.